not everything happens for a reason, right? That's the phrase we all like to hear, that everything happens for a reason. It's never really resonated with me because I've had so many things happen to me over my lifespan that, and then also, I mean, people have that conversation about, is it really true that, you lose a child to cancer, or you lose a husband to cancer, or there's a tragic accident and,
Mm.
um, oh, there's a reason for it, right? I've always had a hard time with that. I call it now in my conversation pivoting, right? So do you pivot in whatever's happening to you? So, you have a job change, I had some personal loss, lost my husband to cancer, things like that. How do you land? Right? That's kind of how I like to phrase it. How are you planning on landing from that event? And if you're thoughtful about it, right? If you take a minute and you say, this is how I'd like to come out of this particular situation, then you can set yourself up for that. I only had like one last amount of money in the bank that would pay my mortgage for the month of July, and then I was out of money. I have a lot of faith in myself, is the right word, or faith in that if you think clearly, if you take time and you do think through your choices, they come out better. Clarity shows up in the calm. You gotta get to the calm first. Don't let people force you to always immediately answer.
Michelle, welcome. So nice to be talking to you.
I'm excited to be here talking with you as well. It's fun.
I
This is my first podcast.
Yay! Awesome. I'm honored. We're all honored. I love that. And I
Yes.
actually saw you on LinkedIn. So I saw that you posted some deeper reflections, and I'm all about that. So I reached out to you. We had a little bit of a conversation, and here we are. You agreed to
Here
talk.
we are. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I think so. My journey has been kind of an interesting one. I spent most of my career as a sales leader in, consumer products. And that's kind of why LinkedIn comes into play, right? We're very comfortable, at least my generation is very comfortable on LinkedIn. And, we're still getting used to a lot of these other, places you can comment and podcast and talk and speak and, all the things. So, yeah, so I've had a lot of kind of personal turns, professional turns, in life, and as I've been reflecting on that recently, and I'm starting on a book, and doing a few things like that. Yeah, that's exciting. I just started putting some stuff out on LinkedIn that I think about daily, that would maybe just get people talking for a minute, or just get you to think for a second, about how your day is going, or what things are affecting it, or that kind of thing. So yeah, it's been fun. I've been getting some good reactions and met you, which is a perk of these things. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm excited.
And that's another reason why I wanted to talk to you, because it's on many people's minds, right? These deeper reflections, these conversations, these ahas, if you will, kind of the processing, right? As we go through life,
Hmm.
we're looking for answers, we're looking for some meaning, some interpretation, and more than glossing over, just showing up for work in our titles, or, kind of more surface level robotic way. So, what would you like to share a little bit more around your journey, and maybe how did those reflections start percolating up for you?
Yeah, I think for me, it's so I was for most of my life, I was a single mom, raised three daughters.
Mm,
Working and balancing, work life, right, is
mm,
a thing that a lot of people don't. I mean, we're talking about it more and more, but for a long time, and especially in my career, you just didn't really talk about it. You took care of your family life, right? And then you took care of your work life, and you didn't mix the two very much, not as often. I think people are much more open to that now, to talking about what's going on,
mm.
behind the scenes, right, at your home. I used to joke all the time with my male counterparts that, I'm out here doing the exact same job as you, but you have a partner at home who's picking up all the pieces of your family, paying the mortgage, taking care of shopping, taking the kids to school, all those things. And you're just getting, I shouldn't say just, but you're focusing over here, and I'm having to do both things, right? I'm literally doing them at the same time.
Mm.
And so through that, a lot of my friends would always say, "Oh my God, I don't know how you do it, right? And you must be so strong, and you must be so resilient, and all the things." And I started thinking about, well, I don't know, is it strength and resilience, or is it just, I call it now in my conversation pivoting, right? So do you pivot in whatever's happening to you? So, you have a job change, you have, I had some personal loss, lost my husband to cancer, things like that. How do you land? Right? That's kind of how I like to phrase it. How are you planning on landing from that event? And if you're thoughtful about it, right? If you take a minute and you say, this is how I'd like to come out of this particular situation, then you can set yourself up for that, right? And it might be immediate. It might be, oh my gosh, I now need a new job. I have to pay my mortgage. I have to pay my bills. So I need something immediate. Or it could be, well, I have this immediate challenge, but where do I want to really be in 2 years? So how do I set myself up for that, as opposed to panicking and feeling overwhelmed and, taking all that. So take the moment,
Mhm.
think about it for a little while, figure out where do you really want to land, and then how do I, address moving forward. So I say you pivot and then you rise, right? So you come out of whatever that is and you rise up into however you want that to look. Um, one of the most recent posts I had on LinkedIn, which I think had the most reaction, was that not everything happens for a reason, right? That's the phrase we all like to hear, that everything happens for a reason. Um, it's never really resonated with me because I've had so many things happen to me over my lifespan that, and then also, I mean, people have that conversation about, is it really true that, you lose a child to cancer, or you lose a husband to cancer, or there's a tragic accident, and,
Mm.
um, oh, there's a reason for it, right? I've always had a hard time with that. So now I look at it and say, you find the reason for it
Mm.
later, right? So
Mm.
you, there's not a reason for it maybe in the moment,
Mm.
but generally, if you decide to pivot from that and land with purpose and rise out of it, you can look back on it later and say, well, likely the reason I used that to go here, right, was this. So, for example, when my husband passed away from cancer, very young family, the whole thing. And I said to myself, well, I'd like to help some other families whose husbands are either sick or dying with cancer, because these women with young children may not have a lot of options.
Mm.
So that was my reason for that happening to me, right? But was it really the reason it happened? So
Mm.
I think that's what I'm trying to explore a little bit with that comment as well. And it seemed to be a lot of people felt the same. Like, yeah, how do we say there was a reason for everything,
Mm.
right?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing it and sharing that story. It's obviously very private and not for the faint of heart. I mean, I have a lot of compassion for what you just shared and what you've gone through, and
Thank
it's
you.
not easy. That is so hard. I had two sisters, so we were three girls, and my mom had a tough, in different ways, a tough um, life bringing us up. My dad didn't pass away, but he was narcissistic and very emotionally cruel and abusive at
Mhm,
times. So it was a different kind of, she lost him to not to death, but it was a different kind of struggle. So
mhm.
um, what you've done, right, being able to raise three kids and go through it, I mean, that is a lot. It takes a lot of strength.
Yeah, I think, and I'm sorry for your mom too, because I've experienced that as well. So, a partner that wasn't really there for you,
Mm.
that's, you use that term loosely at that point, right? Because you realize that they're very, selfish or self-centered, and they're
Mm.
not as broad, they're not dealing as broadly, right, with what the meaning of partner is.
Mm.
Um, and
Yeah.
so yeah, again, you have to just say to yourself in those moments, um, what is this teaching me? What am I learning?
Mhm.
I think as life is chapters, right? I mean, it sounds a little cliche, but they really are. I mean, as soon as you move past one, you're closing that chapter, right? And then, it leads into another one, right? The book doesn't just stop there. So, you finish your chapter perhaps in a marriage or a job or a medical diagnosis,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And you process and you glean and get through all of that, right? And then you close that. You say, okay, I survived, or I you know went on to maybe change my life. I decided to leave that partner, or the job was toxic, and I decided that I'm now going to transition to something else. So as you're doing each of those things, you're kind of closing a little bit of a chapter, right? But you still have to take that information and move into your next chapter. You're not going to leave it behind. It's still going to be part of your book, right? So, um, I look at it and say my book is full of significant challenges. I think everybody's life is not a straight line, right? And there's no one life that's harder or simpler than another. I mean, we all walk in our own, shoes, and we can't begin. Like I have sisters, and each of us have a very different life, and we
Mhm.
all came out of the same. We're products of the same household, right? But none of us have had the same story in our life. So I think that we have to really examine that when we're being compassionate. To your point, using compassion, using thought, being thoughtful, and realize that we really do only get to do this once. So, try to do it as best you can. You're going to counter again a lot of these little pivots in life, but,
Mhm.
um, look at them broadly, I guess, as learning, teaching moments.
So,
So,
Michelle, what chapter are you on right now, and what is the next chapter for
thank you
you?
for asking. Yeah, I think right now I'm really in a thought chapter, I'd call it, right? So I'm doing a lot of reflecting, right? So as I'm writing my book, um, which I am calling right now loosely Pivot and Rise. I don't know if that's kind of the end title, but and it's basically about, you have control, right? Things happen to you, but you still have control. So uh, how are you pivoting out of these things? How are you rising? So as I'm writing these chapters, and I'm going all the way back to my childhood, I unfortunately lost my father when I was only 3 years old. I didn't even realize at that time how much that would affect me, because when you're a little girl, 3 years old, you don't understand the big transition you've just experienced, right? Because you're just a little girl, and everybody's trying to move things forward. But I never really processed that.
Mhm.
um, and choices in life of jobs or people I've worked for, or, to your point, sometimes people are very selfish, narcissistic personalities, and you are maybe a very much an empathy driven person who's willing to give people a broad stroke, right? And you always want to fix things, or, whatever, which is who I am. I'm very much a fixer, because as a product of losing my father very young, and then having a stepfather who was an alcoholic, and then moving into relationships that weren't great, because I didn't understand that what I was doing was protecting myself all the time. So anyway, without going through all of that, so the chapter I'm in now is really to look at all of that and say, how do I then impart or help e- not only myself but others? So as I'm writing them, it's helping me a lot, because I'm processing these things and saying, oh, that's why that did happen that way. That's why I did make that choice, because of what happened to me in the past. It influenced, what choices I'm making now. And if you don't stop to think about those, you just keep repeating the same maybe bad choices, or
Mhm.
bad's probably not the right word, but what's the word I want? They're just repetitive, right? They're
Yeah, you can
habits.
start looping in the same
Yeah,
circle.
exactly. Yeah, they may have different faces,
Mhm.
but they're the same person inside, right? That you surround yourself with, because you don't even realize that that's what you're attracting, right? That's
Mhm.
what you're bringing in. So, um, yeah, so I'm trying to make a lot of sense of the moment, right? Just like say,
Mm,
okay, here's where I am. One example I like to say is, so when I go on job interviews, sometimes people will say, "Oh, you've had a lot of transition. You've changed. Had multiple jobs along your career." And some people find that to be a
mhm,
negative, right? Because they're thinking, "Well, she doesn't stick with what she starts, or
mhm.
whatever."
Yeah.
And you can't really explain in depth the kind of people you worked for or the job you had, right? You can only just say, "Well, uh, so my answer now is, well, it's exactly who I am right now. All of that life experience is exactly who I am right now. Who you're hiring right now is the person that's bringing all of that with her. So whether it's from one company or 20, doesn't matter. All your life experiences are the person you're talking to. You and I are talking to the person
Mhm.
who did all that, right? Who lived all those things, who can bring you whatever value they have, right? So why does it matter how you got here? You know what I mean?
Mhm.
You're talking to the person who's here now.
Yes.
So I think that's
Yeah.
really important that we accept that about ourselves, right? Like I'm I like myself, I think that I know certainly there were probably decisions I might have made differently if I knew now, as I always say, right? If I knew now what I didn't know
Mhm.
then. But who would I be if I had made those decisions differently? I'd be somebody else.
Yes.
So, you wouldn't have those same building blocks, those same chapters, right? You'd be a different person. So it's good to reflect on that, I think.
It's a challenging question or attitude in interviews to navigate, that's for sure, because it's so much dependent on the context and the person asking and their own aperture, right? We all filter
Mhm.
our experience so
Yeah,
individually.
what are they bringing, right, with their baggage, as they say, right? What are they carrying forward? So, yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
much, and it's sometimes you can't win like the answering, and it's like I'm glad that you've made all the perfect choices, that you've had a perfect life.
Yeah,
You know,
there's no scars on you, exactly,
yes.
yeah, there's definitely nothing happening, yeah, yeah, I don't know, I think you can't take it personally either, right?
No.
But there is one thing that it's almost like that whole, phrase of, everything happens for a reason. I also don't love when people say, "Don't take it personally, it's just business." It's like, yeah,
Right?
I don't know that it always is, but,
Mm, like
you
it's a
know,
nice cop out for lack of character too.
it's 100 that is a perfect way of phrasing it, yeah,
Yeah.
because I have experienced, choices that I found, really interesting in the sense that they followed something, right? So maybe you talk to HR, right, about something that you were concerned about, and then
Mhm,
suddenly it's turned into that she's a disagreeable person, right? Or she
mhm,
challenges her superiors, right? As opposed to, no, it was just for me difficult. It doesn't mean I'm difficult, right? But for me, it might have been difficult, or those kind of things. I mean, I have to say, I do really appreciate a lot of the younger generation. My daughters are, uh, they're 22, 27, and 30 now, but
mm,
um, very different from my time, right? Like when I was working, in that, we were very much supposed to just do what we're told, right? Like that was just the way it was. You don't argue, you follow the line. And even if it hurts your feelings, right, you're supposed to just be like, oh God, that wasn't comfortable, but you were just supposed to sort of soldier on, right?
mm,
And now I appreciate that when I talk to them, they are just horrified in some ways, that I would tell them some situation and they're like, what? Like, why would you put up with that kind of thing? And you're like, well, you just were supposed to. And now they all kind of raise their hands, and say, no, this is not okay. It's not comfortable, or it's not appropriate, or it's insensitive, or, all the things, right? And certainly, I think we do need a middle ground, because there's also too sensitive to, all those things, right? But I do like the fact that we're starting to at least pay attention to that. There's a person in that,
yeah,
worker, right? That's
yeah,
that's doing these things, and
yeah.
so. Yeah, I think people should, take a look at that too, that just be kind. Really, honestly, isn't it? It's so cliche, but like, how about if we just take a minute every time we're a little bit annoyed or every time we're trying to figure something out, right? Just take a breath and
Yeah.
maybe try to walk in their shoes a tiny bit. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it takes a lot of strength and to be kind, to have the compassion in action, in the situations that are triggering and where stressful, maybe high stakes, kind of where the real character gets revealed.
Yeah, I mean, we don't control every event, right? But we can control how we react to them.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's uh,
Yeah. I
that's
mean, we
again,
try. We try,
Mhm.
definitely. I have been, when you're rattled and you feel so stressed because I mean obviously this world there are many demands, just even how you said you're raising kids, right, and you're just sometimes just trying to survive.
Right. Well, I think we
Mm.
just try to force clarity, right? That's the other thing. We try to get to the meat and potatoes of it, like, because we feel like if we can get to that, then it's going to solve all of
Mhm.
it, right? As opposed to
Mm.
just saying, wait a minute, let me just reflect a little bit, right? Like, I'm not going to force the answer. I'm not going to force the clarity. I'm not going to force, like, I don't know, rush to fix and solve it, right? Because when we do that, which I have a history of doing, because I felt like control was power, right? Control was
Mhm.
uh, keeping chaos at bay, right? So if
Yeah.
everything stayed ordered, then I had some magical power over it. You know what I mean? Like, at least,
Mhm.
But I would rush to force that clarity, and in doing that, then you're pressing against another person's personality, maybe, or you're pressing against a situation that you don't know the whole
Mhm.
story for, right? And you're trying to get clarity so quickly that you're going to miss, in a sense, everybody else's input, right? Like, it's like making a cake in a way. You want to finish up with the flour and this, and they're like, no, you still need some baking soda, and you still need this in here and this in here, and you
Mhm.
forgot to put this in first. And this happened outside before you even knew, right? Like, before the cake even came in here. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just feel like for me anyway, I think if we can all just take a minute, right, and just say, okay, maybe I'm not really understanding the situation, but it's a when you feel something in your body, right? When you're uncomfortable, you know it, right? You're like, oof, gives you a little twinge, right? You don't like it, the conversation. You don't like maybe what something looks like. You don't like that. Maybe you're walking into an uncomfortable environment, right? You really feel it in your body. And I think that sometimes when we're in the middle of something, whether it be business, whether it be personal relationships, whatever, that since we feel like now everybody else should feel it, right? Like, don't you see that this is, an uncomfortable situation, or this doesn't seem right, or we're not handling this well, or you're not handling this well? And they're all like, no, I don't see that, because it's not bothering them, right? They're not feeling it uncomfortably. And so sometimes I think I have to remind myself to say, okay, well, just because I'm uncomfortable doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's uncomfortable to me from my previous chapters, as we were just talking about, right? Those are all things that led to me being uncomfortable, but was this moment truly uncomfortable to everybody else?
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
I feel like it's just a lot of times, just because it's us, if there's a room full of people, doesn't mean that we're all experiencing it the same way.
Definitely not.
Yeah. But we
Definitely
tend to
not.
put our feelings on others, right? Like, we tend to say, well, you must, right, feel this way, right? Because we're trying to kind of control the chaos and the narrative, I guess. But
I mean, I like that you're saying about clocking what you're feeling. I think that many of us try to override it in the name of
mhm.
what others are feeling, but your experience is valid.
Yeah,
And I
right,
think many of us try to outrun our own, yeah, that knowing and
right.
not pay attention to it. And something can be toxic, and the toxic person, of course, will not feel bad. But if you clock it and validate that, yeah, this is not good for me, not right for me. It's tremendously clarifying and helpful, especially if you're a good person who's always trying to think about others, solve the
Right, right.
problem, find the solution, because not everybody's like that.
Yeah. No, I think I think it's super healthy, but I think we also have to have an awareness that it's almost, I mean, I don't know. I think we get very general, right? We get very
Yeah, it's
we,
context is everything. The situation
yes, there you go. That's
is everything.
perfect. That's a
Yeah,
perfect way of
you can't
phrasing it. Yeah.
generalize. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we'll
When
get
did
into,
you
go ahead. I'm sorry.
when when did you start thinking about forcing clarity? How did that bubble up for you?
I would say ever since I was young, and I didn't know I was doing it, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's part of this whole reflective stage I'm in going back and writing about times in my life when I was younger. Even just 20s, right? 30s. You're going through so many processes of change and just experiences that you're crossing, right?
Mhm.
And so having come through, probably the most part, I think the most reflective of it is, coming through having a stepfather that was an alcoholic, right? So you're walking around on eggshells all the time. You don't know which person you're going to be talking to, which guy's coming into the room, how is he affected in your life, right?
Mhm.
Every day. And so I would want to force kind of the clarity of the situation, right? Like,
Yeah,
what are we dealing with here? How did we get to this point? How do
of
we,
course.
align it, right? How do we measure it? How do we fix it? How do we keep it from getting harder to deal with?
Mm,
De-escalation, all the things, right? So
mm,
um, that carried through for me, I think,
of
even to
course.
this day. Yeah, because I just always thought that controlling the chaos and forcing clarity over the
Mhm.
situation, would give me comfort slash control, all the things that would help me feel like I wasn't
Safe.
running around on eggshells, right?
Yeah,
But it doesn't. You don't realize that till later, that the forcing of it doesn't do any good. It's still the same repetitive um, chapter over and over again. You're still in a sense supporting the behavior, right? Because you're saying, um, don't worry, I'll get this in order. I'll control all of this chaos. I'll get the person or the situation into a narrative that everybody else can work with, right? So that you can take out some of that uncertainty for everyone. In doing that, you're saying, I'm taking it out for myself, but honestly, you're just, uh, for me anyway, I was just trying to get control enough for me. But I felt like the explanation of all of that, or the reason for it, was so that I was taking care of everybody else too in the room, right? Like, if the situation is controlled, then everybody's going to be fine, you
mhm,
know. But the situation can be the person that you're dealing with, right? And so, without
mhm,
knowing how to deal with that, I'm not a trained psychologist, right? And I look at that a lot of times when people are giving advice, even this conversation, right? I would say to anybody listening, it's not advice I'm giving. It's a narrative. It's a perspective, right? It's
cool.
a lived experience that maybe you can draw from. But certainly, I have no idea what your same life might have been like, living maybe with a father that had, was an alcoholic. Maybe a completely different experience, right?
Mhm,
Not to mention your chapters leading to that point, plus your chapters
mhm.
after that, are not the same as mine. So, um, but yeah, it doesn't work, honestly, to force
When did you
clarity.
when did you realize that it's not working for you any longer?
I think I realized it once. So I just recently went through a personal, I was with someone for 10 years, and that was a
Mm,
very difficult person to deal with. And I was falling back on my same habits, right? Well, if I control the narrative, if I make sure everything he wants is good, everything, the environment that he needs,
mm,
the this, the that, right? that I'm again, controlling everything. I'm keeping it all sane. But, none of it was comfortable for me. Ultimately, I was not in a happy place. I was not walking around in joy every day. I was not all those things. I was keeping it from being horrible, but it wasn't working. And so when I started to, that ended, then I went through breast cancer diagnosis. And it was literally, like, I don't know, weeks or not even a month, maybe after the breakup, and found out that, I had this diagnosis. And I was like, okay, here I am. You just start to reflect, right? Here I am. I'm, well, what was I, 60, 62 years old, come out of a 10-year relationship. I'm now a single person. My kids are out of the house, and I'm entering into this diagnosis and this chapter pretty much by myself, right? Like, you have friends, you have family, but you're approaching it in a moment of, wow, this is now going to be on me, and I gotta take care of this. And in preparing for it mentally and emotionally, one of the things that I really realized, which is kind of the epiphany of all the things that I'm talking about, was, okay, I really have to pivot here. I have to, this is a really conclusive, like, big change, right? Like, I really have to pivot here and figure out how do I want to land here? How do I want this to look, right? How do I want to experience this? How do I want to move forward? How do I want to take care of myself? Right? Because there was nobody else at this point to take care of. Right. And thank you for the applause, because I'd never done it. I'd never fully taken care of just myself, since I was, a little girl. Right. So
Because
I,
in a way, even when you were talking about these reactions, right, of a stepfather, of a grown up, you are managing, you're controlling, you're taking on a burden of over functioning and being responsible for controlling outcome. I mean, you are seeking safety as a child. You need
right.
safety, you need nurturing. And now you're stepping in and over functioning. So you've over functioned a lot of your life.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I never really knew that, right? I always just thought this was the normal way people acted, right? Like, so I was running in survival mode 90% of my life.
Mhm.
And to your point, over functioning. Um, and always felt that I needed to take care of everybody. So my children, my partners, my parents, everybody had to get a piece of Michelle. They had to, if I wasn't doing that, then I clearly wasn't a good mother, good friend, good partner, good employee, right? If I wasn't doing so much more, right? And so when the diagnosis came, of course, I had already lost my husband to cancer years before. So cancer was not a good word in my house. And then to personally, be told that that's what you're facing, I really did have to reevaluate and say, okay, I don't know how much time I have. Do you have years? Do you have months? Do you have, moments? Right. Luckily, my diagnosis was very positive, but you still reflect because, I watched a man lose his life and he was only 44 years old, extremely healthy guy, go downhill in a year, from diagnosis to death. So it was scary, but at the same time, like I said, I don't like to make it tragic. I like to make it more like, say, well, here I am, like, here it is. This is the moment in my life right now, like a critical choice of how do I want to do this? Just me, because there was nobody else to consult, honestly, at that point. Um, and so I reached out to a life coach friend of mine, and she helped me through a lot of things emotionally about the breakup and just things like that. And then she helped me start talking about a lot of these kind of things we're talking about. And I said, okay, well, I talked with the doctors, found out all my options, and they wanted me to kind of go like right into surgery. And I was like, well, do I have time? Because I'd really like to take a few months. I had some things I really wanted to do over the summer that were personal to me. I wanted to get healthier. I wanted to go back to the gym. I wanted to eat better. I wanted to just get mentally strong with my counselor. And so, I started I met this wonderful group of women that were doing, exercise together, jazzercise and all this stuff. And they were fantastic people and just the emotional uplift. Anyway, long story short, with all of those things, pieces together, I really felt good and confident, honestly, going into the surgeries that I was going to be fine. And I had no noise outside my own head, right? So nobody could say I was making a good choice or a bad choice, or there was nobody else to consult except myself. And there was so much peace in that, that, like when I went into the surgeries, the nurses actually in the morning, they were like, you seem like you're just like this is a walk in the park, like you're just going to get, a little stitch in your finger. And meanwhile, I was getting a double mastectomy done. And I'm just like, well, I'm ready for this. I'm prepared emotionally. I feel like I'm physically ready. I've done all the research. I understand what my options are. I know that I'm going to, have a recovery period. But after that recovery period, I knew what I wanted to look like on the other side, right? I knew the person I wanted to be. And throw all in the middle of this, when I told my company that I had breast cancer, I got let go from my job.
I'm so sorry.
So, no, so I literally at that point had nobody else to consult. I mean, I didn't have to worry about my work, values, right? Because I always overperformed there too. I didn't have to worry about whether or not, I was going to have to take time off. I didn't have to worry about if I had a partner who needed me. I didn't worry about if I had kids who needed me. I didn't have to care about anything other than just going through this moment in life. And so it really just started me on a path of, listen, you don't control any of these things that get thrown at you, but if you do, take the time to pause and realize, what do you want to look like? How do you want to land in this? What kind of person do you want to be? How do you want to approach it? All the things.
Mhm.
There's a ton of strength in that versus fear, right? Versus worry, versus fear, versus concern for everybody else's well-being.
Mhm.
Just you, just what's going to work only for you in this moment. Filter out, any other influences,
Mhm.
and then you might have to layer on influences later. Like, for example, if you still were working, or if you still had a spouse, or if you still had kids, or all those things, of course, you're going to have to layer those on to make sure that you're taking care of those things. But if you just focus first on what is it that's going to make you the most successful, then the layering, the other stuff will just come along, as opposed to you controlling the narrative and trying to fix it all without considering yourself. So that's really what happened.
I love this, story of now coming back to taking care of you. I mean, just like in any area you think of, out there, from Instagram advice to whatever advice, from relationship to career, there's just so interviewing, so much focus on what do they want,
Right.
what, how to make it work because they are XYZ, way or whatever. Same with the
Mhm.
interviews, how to, you know, answer it in a way that the company will deem attractive, right? Or
Yeah.
how to do everything is about the external versus how about starting from centering you in the
Mhm.
best of ways, in the most powerful ways, and then watch it outflow in all areas of your life. Because essentially, you're so trained to audition,
Right.
to vie for attention, to make it work, but is it working for you?
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you. I've been auditioning my whole life because, and, moments happen, like I was saying earlier, where when after my husband passed away and I had three children and I'm, working a full-time job, I took 2 years off. I took a year off while he was ill. And then, because fortunately, when I was in my 20s, I just put a whole bunch of money like in 401ks and stuff. So I had a little cushion, and I took a year off while he was ill. And then after he passed, I took a year off because I'm thinking, how on earth? I got three kids. One of them was only 2 years
Mhm.
old. And I need to just, I didn't even know what I needed to do. Let's just put it that way, right? I was so overwhelmed by it all.
Mm.
And if I had taken a couple minutes at that point to just say, okay, what do I need first? Right? Like, what do I really need first? Not what do I need to do to take care of my 3 kids? What do I need to do to take care of me first? And then the taking care of the 3 kids would have just followed suit, right? Because I would have been feeling the best about
Mhm.
myself.
Mhm.
So one of the things was I can't work. There's no way I can work, right? So I had to stop and say, well, people were very concerned for me. They were like, well, but you don't have a ton of money. You still have to. We didn't have life insurance, so you still have to make a living. You still have 3 kids to take care of. You still have to, blah 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 blah, right? And I've been a career person my whole life. I'm like, I know, but I will be ineffective to everybody. I won't be effective to my job. I won't be effective to my children. I won't be effective to myself if I don't take this year off,
Mm.
And I kept saying to myself, it'll work out sooner or later. This is going to work out.
Mm.
Um, one of the things I like to say to myself in the morning is things always work out for me. You just say that out loud. You don't know what that thing is. It could be anything, right? You could get your favorite cup of coffee that day, and that's the
Mhm.
only thing that matters. Okay, it works out for me, or eventual, right? So literally, I think it was 1 year later, I was talking with people trying to find a new position. Of course, I'd been out of work a year. Now I have 3 children that I take care of full time, and they're all thinking to me, Michelle, how on earth are you going to travel? I've been a traveling salesperson. How are you going to do all that, with the kids and, the whole thing? I said, I will do it. Don't worry about that. And a lot of people didn't want to take a chance on me because they were like, there's no way this woman is going to be able to do this. And last minute, literally, I think I had one. Yeah, I think I only had like one last amount of money in the bank that would pay my mortgage for the month of July. And then I was out of money. And a friend of a friend put me in touch with a guy who said, let's talk. I think that you could potentially do this. And he's like, but you're going to have to travel to China back and forth multiple times a year. How are you going to be able to do that? I said, don't worry. I have friends. I have family. I'm going to work this out. And he gave me that job, and I worked that job for 5.5 years, and I worked hard, and, the whole thing, I balanced it, but I literally was down to my last paycheck, and I didn't know
Wow.
how I was going to pay my mortgage after that. But, I chuckled, but at the time I was just like, but it's going to work out. It's going to work out. It will, if you take care of yourself,
Mm.
and it'll work out. People will recognize something in you, or they'll see a value, or they'll catch a moment, whatever it might be, that'll move you forward, I think. So yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that and the details, because a lot of people are going through layoffs, different situations now as we are recording this. And there's just all kinds of spectrum of different situations, right, that are happening. And somebody here, the right person who needs to hear it, it will help exactly with where they're at, because we can have this narrative, right? Or the fear can really take over. How much fear did you feel when you were at that point?
I have to say that's one thing. I had a boss say that to me the other day. He's like, "You're never afraid, are you?" I said, "No, I don't think I am. I have a lot of faith in, I guess, myself is the right word, or faith in that, if you think clearly, if you take time and you do think through your choices, they come out better. I've taken jobs in a hurry. I've taken jobs in 5 minutes because, oh shit, excuse me, but I got to pay my mortgage, and I need health insurance, and I got 3 kids, and the whole thing. I've taken those jobs. None of those jobs went well, right? Um,
Like, you
because
knew
you're
you had that knowing?
say that again.
Did you know? Did you have that knowing, kind of that, when you
I,
were
I
making that decision?
I think we do. I think we have it in our stomachs a little bit, right? Like, um, I, because even now to this day, when I'm looking at new opportunities, because I do a lot of consulting, and I am actually looking right now to see if I can maybe go back to helping one company, because I've been helping multiple companies. I'd kind of like to get back to a focus. And as I'm talking to folks, one of the key things I say to them is, I want this to be a fit for both of us, right? Because I just think that, um, a lot of times, to your point, we're auditioning, we're doing all of that, but the company should be auditioning to you too. If you aren't really comfortable with the folks that you're going to go to work for, and they're not doing the things that maybe you could support, you're going to feel uncomfortable, and you're not going to be successful. I think that if you hurry to the end, then you're going to not do your due diligence. And so then you're going to make mistakes. I guess that's where I'm going there. I hurried in that they didn't work out because I didn't check hard enough about what the job might entail, what kind of, maybe personality the company had, right? Does it jive with mine? Right. Because I'm a very ethical person, and I believe that salespeople in particular, you're selling yourself first, right? People have to like you and trust you if they're going to buy anything from you. It's not even the company; it's you, right? If you walk in and talk to a real estate agent and you don't really feel comfortable with her, you're not buying that house. Or if you go into a car dealer, I'm going to go to another dealership, right? If you walk into even TJ Maxx and you encounter somebody who's a salesperson who's, maybe a little abrupt, you're going to turn around, you're going to go, because you're just not comfortable there, right? So salespeople are selling themselves first. And so, my whole life has been about keeping my reputation there, so that when, I have some customers that were, 30 years ago that still, if I called them tomorrow, they'd say, yeah, of course, what are you selling? Because they knew that I had all the things I did before, I would do again. Right. So, fear, I'm not afraid. I think that's a big, unfortunate place to come from, right? Fear.
It's a
Um,
powerful message. It is a
yeah,
very powerful message, because I hear over and over when I go, on other podcasts, and, the questions that I get is like, and I know it's about, how about fear? I feel so much fear. People don't, like, they stay in jobs where they're not fulfilled, where they know if they didn't go there for the money, like if they had the $10 million in the bank account, they would not be putting their life force behind that thing tomorrow. But
right.
they're so chained
Yeah.
by the fear and the illusion of security from whatever belief they now have hooked into themselves.
Yeah, right. I think that probably one of the things that helped me was that I had so many situations happen to me over the years. I think 4 different times the companies I went to work for were purchased by another company, right? So then they downsize you out, or they bring you in, even knowing that they're going to sell, but they're not telling you that, because of course they can't tell you that. So then you're only there for maybe 6 months or a year, because they're in the business of trying to get this company sold, and they're just trying to get more volume or whatever. So you bring that to them, and then suddenly they're like, yeah, thanks for doing that, but we're selling our
Yeah,
company.
yeah.
So, those are things that you can't fear. But no, fear stops us from doing everything, right? From getting up in the morning, from, driving a car, maybe, to getting on an airplane, to, fear stops a lot of things. So, I don't mean that you should be fearless, but I think that you should have an awareness of what is stopping you. What is the fear? The fear of what? Rejection, or making a mistake, or not getting the job, or feeling embarrassed, or whatever that might be. Then I would my suggestion would be, then just talk to yourself about it. But what's really the worst that could happen? A lot of these cases, you're never going to experience these people again in your life. You'll never see them again. You could embarrass yourself because you fall down walking, in the mall or whatever. But who's paying attention to that? Nobody else. You, you're creating the embarrassment, right? Because there's not a soul in there that's going to really care, unless you end up on social media, I suppose. but even then, you should just laugh at yourself. Again, it's like, I don't know. I guess, yeah. I think that's one thing that I've just taught myself, maybe, that there's it's going to work out. It's going to work out
I love
if
that.
you just say that to yourself. If you believe it, it's going to work out. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Know it.
yeah, yeah.
Know
Do
it.
I mean, even I'm sure even when you were, starting this podcast, people were probably like, "Really? Like, aren't you nervous? Don't you, isn't it weird?" Or, whatever comments they might have given you. And you're like, "No, I'm confident in this. I feel good about it. I'm going to give it a shot." And all the best people, honestly, are those people who just gave it a shot. Like I'm writing a book, and I can't tell you how many people say to me, "You're writing a book?" Like they find it so fascinating, and I'm like, they're like, "Well, what are you writing about?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm writing about my life." And they're like, "Huh," like thinking, "Is anybody going to really read that?" And I'm like, "I don't know, but I'm doing it, so we'll see. I don't need to be Mel Robbins, but, why not?"
Yeah. Give it a shot. It's a
Yeah, give
powerful
it a shot.
message. When you talk
Yeah, I mean,
about forcing clarity,
mhm,
did you mean like forcing, because a lot of people like the reason also why we don't do things and why we don't leave the jobs that are not working for us because we lack clarity. And we want to, like, this world models like just do, right, take action. I mean, this is enforced
mhm,
everywhere around
mhm,
us, like produce, control, manage, right? So
mhm,
we've
mhm.
internalized that other hook into
Right.
our system, so that's why we force things, and we
Mhm.
have a hard time. I've had a hard time in the past of actually allowing receiving. I mean, it's been one of the hardest integrations. It sounds easy, but it's not, because it's on the other side of everything you've been programmed to do.
Mhm.
And can you tell us a little more? What did you mean by forcing clarity? Was it your own clarity or others to see like the situation because you already saw it clearly? And how kind of any lessons that were takeaways for you?
Well, I think for me, I just sort of learned that, clarity shows up in the calm, right? So
Mm,
you gotta get to the calm first, right? And if you can't if you're fearful, if you're
mhm.
anxious, if you're, all the things, right, that you were talking about, if you feel like you have to perform, if you are worried
Stressed
about,
out.
yeah, you're stressed, you have financial thing, all that, right? So clarity can't come in that space.
Mm.
It can only come in the calm, right? So, um, space brings you better answers. Uh, yeah, it's peace, right? So again, if you just take the time to say, "I'm going to breathe through this," or "I'm just going to sit with this a couple days," don't let people force you to always immediately answer. I mean, I even think just conversationally, right? Even interviewing, even just having a chat with your friend at a cocktail hour, right? We all feel like we have to jump on the answer, right? Like if I'm not answering, then clearly I'm not thinking, or I'm just not that smart, or do you know what I mean? Like it's like we all want to fill the space with either words or some kind of wise wisdom, right? Or I've done this my whole life. I am guilty of it because I always felt like being right in the moment, or being smart in the moment, or whatever was, uh made you look like you were that person, right? You were smart, or you were, whatever. Or that if you could make your argument to convince somebody else, then you were winning, right? Like you're winning. But what I've realized more and more as I've gotten a little older too is just like, but is that the important part? It's not really the important part. The winning the conversation, or winning the argument, and or giving somebody else your opinion every time. Like, well, I wouldn't do that. Are you kidding me? There's no way I'm jumping off a ship. Do 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 do. Right? Well, how about just taking a pause for a minute, right? And just saying, like, when I say to somebody, I'm writing a book, instead of saying, "What? Why?" or "Geez, what's that all about?" or whatever, just maybe sit for a second and say, "A book. Tell me more about that, right? It might just that 1 second of maybe before I give them all my opinions of how bad the idea this is for them, right? Maybe I should just ask them why they're doing it or what are they, like tell me more first before I tell you you're out of your mind, right? So so in the space of listening then, right? You took a moment, you let them keep talking, you listen, and then you say, to yourself, well, maybe I will let them know that I think this is nuts. Or maybe I just say, well, I'm sure you'll make the best decision for you, which I think is a really powerful sentence, right? We're all very, very quick. I'm guilty of it. My children will tell you this over and over again. Mom, you're always telling us what to do. But I'm like, well, I know what I'm doing, but I don't know what I'm doing because I'm not them, right? But what I need to start saying more, which I have started saying a lot more, is I'm sure you'll make the best decision for you. If you'd like my opinion and my view, what I would do, me, I can give it to you, right? But if you're just telling me to tell me, so I'm aware of it, then you got to kind of let me know, right? Because I'm still going to react as your mom, right?
Mm.
But I do this a lot more with friends and family now. I just say, well, I'm sure you'll make the best decision for you because I'm going to turn around, honestly, and I'm going to walk away going, they're nuts in my brain, right? Oh my, why are they doing that? But why would I give them such doubt? Why would I give them my fear? Why would I give them my anxiety? Why would I give them all those things if they don't have it for
My
themselves?
limitations, yeah.
Yes, my limitations. I don't want to jump out of an airplane. I just never ever thought that was a good idea. I just don't want to do it. People tell me all the time they're going to do it. I say, God bless, but so yeah, I think that with clarity shows up in the calm and it also shows up when we're spending a little more time listening than talking.
Mm.
And when we give ourselves space to really hear what our fear might be, right? So I'm taking this job. Why am I taking this job? Well, I'm scared, right? I don't, or I'm staying in this job. To your earlier question, why am I staying in this job?
Mhm.
I'm afraid to go find a new job. I'm old. Whatever you have, right? Your whole list. I'm older. I've never done that before. I've never done anything else. This is all I've ever done. They're telling me that I'm not very good at it. They're just keeping me here. Whatever all these things, right? The whole noise. Um, yeah. I recently stayed at a job longer than I should because I really felt that this person needed my help, and I really thought I was the right person for them. I thought for sure I could move the needle really far for them, and but I wasn't getting any satisfaction or any good feedback from that person. It was more of a much more negative space. But I kept saying, "But I can fix this. I can fix this. I can fix this." Right? Because I am the fixer. I am the organizer. I am the chaos controller. I am the person who does everything for everybody else. I am all those things. It was all my bad habits rolled up into one. And then I finally said to myself, but you don't even like doing this. And then I left. But again, it took me a while. I had to sit with it,
Yeah.
to say, something else is going to come along that's going to be better and anything's better. I'd rather go, and I don't mean this in any kind of way as a slander on anybody. I'd rather change my entire career and go, work as a cashier somewhere. If that's going to make me happy in my, self, in my, in my peace, in all my things,
Mm.
then I'm going to find a way financially to make that work. Because ultimately, we all work way too hard for one thing generally, and that's for money. And what you can do is you can reposition how you're using the money and repurpose it in your life and say, okay, what am I paying for? What lifestyle am I trying to maintain? What are the things that I could potentially, either downsize or live without that I thought on the treadmill of running through my life all these years showed success, right? Like I measured success with things for a long time, as opposed to measuring success with happiness. And
Mm.
enjoying your day and getting up every morning with a positive attitude, right? All those things that, what do they say? You can uh, always get money, but you can't get time.
Mm.
You can always find more money, but you can't find more time.
It's so interesting. Yesterday, me and my son, we watched this Adam Sandler movie, Click. I don't know if you've seen it, where
I haven't seen it, but I have heard of it. Yeah.
he fast forwards essentially
Oh,
to the next promotion, to the increase, to making the partner.
okay. Funny. And he's not any happier, probably, right? As he's getting along the
No,
way.
then he regrets. Like, I mean, it shows like he misses out on everything, and then he wants to rewind, obviously, all of his life. He doesn't want to choose that timeline. And it's just so fitting the conversation we're having, because it's also a little bit of full circle with what you were saying before. This is an invitation. Any area of your life, if you feel or you dissatisfied, essentially,
Hmm.
then starting not with getting the next job, getting the next boyfriend, getting the next partner, but what is it that you truly want?
Right. Yeah.
You make yourself like important. Like you were talking about nourishing yourself, taking care of yourself, and the health challenges and everything. But come back and
Hmm.
start from that place of taking care of you and
Right.
deciding whether the job is important, whether the job fits you, whether the boss fits you, whether the environment and culture fits you, whether the person fits you or will always leave you hungry and malnourished.
Yes. 100%.
And it will
Yeah.
be a slow drip on your life force.
Yes, that's a perfect way of phrasing it. Yes. I think that, well, we all have hindsight, right? We all have that. And so I try not to live with any regret.
Yeah.
I live with lessons, I like to
Mhm.
say. If I don't listen to the lesson, then shame on me. I couldn't change the lesson in the time because I had no other information, right? Like
Mhm.
my ex, I didn't have the information that he was going to be a person that was going to your point, take away a piece of me, a little drip at a time, until after, when I could look back on it and say, "Oh, I see what was happening here. This was chipping away, chipping away, chipping
Mhm.
away." Could I have stopped sooner? Yes. Could I have done some more soul searching at the time? Definitely, yes. And so what have I done? Well, now I've learned, don't let it get that far, right? Don't get that long into the job. Don't get that long into the bad
Mhm.
relationship. Don't get that long into, these situations that you just don't feel good in, you
Mhm.
know. Um, I had this one there, the life coach helped me, and I'm going to try to make it a really short uh example. But what she did for me, she said, okay, I was trying to make a decision about my partner, and she's like, okay, I want you to just close your eyes. I want you to shake everything off. I want you to try to clear your brain. And she put pieces of paper on the floor, and one said stay, one said go, one said something like compromise, and something else. And she's like, I want you to just, I'm not going to tell you, I'm just going to tell you to close your eyes and take a step forward and stand on one of these pieces of paper. And then I'm going to say the word, and then I want you to tell me immediately how you feel. Like, what's your
Mhm.
body telling you? Like, not what you're thinking.
Mhm.
What is physically going on with you? And so I stood on the stay, and I was very uncomfortable. I mean, I was like, I literally couldn't sit still. I mean, I was wiggly and uncomfortable. And she said, okay, step off, clear yourself, change your brain a little. And then she had me get on, stand on go. And then as soon as she said go, my hands went straight to my hips, and I was standing like Superman pose, they call it. Like I was literally like, yeah, like I, hell yeah, and that illustration right there for me changed so many things for me in the long term, because I was just like, wow, like I clearly have known this in my body for a while, but in my brain and my heart, I was fighting against what was true, right? So I would just say we all know. It's just, how do we turn it into from that pivot moment when we know to a rise moment. Where do you want to take it? How do you want to land? What do you want it to look like? What do you want it to look like? And your family, your friends, your partners, your everybody else, they'll come along if you're true to 100% yourself. They will rise with you. And if they don't, those people aren't meant to be around you, because guess what? New people will come who feel your new energy, who understand who you actually are. And it gives me a little bit of chills because I've met some really amazing people because of it. You know, even this conversation is really helping me and moving me forward. It gives me chills because the people that I actually expected to be there for me weren't. And a whole bunch of new people who I would say didn't know me well at, you know, at these points. They figured out who I was, though, because I was being myself. I was being true to me when I, especially when I was going through the cancer journey. And so they were all coming with me, like flocking towards me in a way. And I was like, who are all these people and why are they coming here? And it was all, and every one of them would say, oh, because you're light, like you feel like they all were attracted to it. They all still say it to me in the same way. Well, you did a lot for us, you know, what we got from you during your journey and how you made us feel too. And I'm just like, huh, you know, like, wow, this is what happens when you're true to yourself, when you actually are who you're supposed to be and not asking for everybody else's permission and or doing what you think everybody you auditioning for the role that you think you're supposed to have. You know, I was told I was strong ever since I was a little girl, so I kept being that person. And you know what? I needed to not be sometimes, but I didn't know I didn't know how not to because I was told, "Oh, well, this is who you are, Michelle. You're always the strong one. You're always the one we all go to. You're always the one who can take all of this on. We can't believe how much you can do. You can clearly get it done." And you're like, "Yeah." But I don't know if I really clearly could, but I was just doing it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's a powerful message. Thank you so much, Michelle, for sharing your story. I think
you're
it's more
welcome.
powerful than maybe you even realize. This is
Yeah,
an invitation to become your own superhero.
well, thank you. I'm trying. I am trying. I'm working on it, but
You are. You already
it
are.
has, yeah, it has been a quite a journey, and I am feeling a lot, you know, like I said, it's unfortunate that it has to take to the point of an illness and or a really big pivotal moment, to help us understand that we actually are the person we're supposed to be, and to buy into that, and don't worry about all the outside noise, because you will attract the right people to you for sure.
Mhm.
Just literally doing you, right? Like, don't
Mhm.
audition,
Yeah.
just do you. Yeah, it's gonna work out. It's
That's
gonna
what
work
the
out.
real magnetism is.
Yeah, it does. In your aura, your color, you know, all the things, whatever you want to believe in, your spiritualness, your, you know, I think it all comes into play, you know, whether you're, you know, highly religious or not, you know, whatever. I think all those things, they do line up. And yeah, I'm grateful for all the lessons is all I can say. And now I'm just trying to give them perspective, you know. You know, like I think I said on one of my quotes was, you know, remember to put your own oxygen mask on first,
Mhm.
right?
It's funny you say that because something you were talking about like earlier and like it was proverbial, you know, in the plane, like, right, the instructions to first put the mask on yourself, right?
Yeah, because if you don't, you're no help to anybody else. And so
Exactly.
like on the airplane and in life, put your own oxygen mask on first, and then everything else will work out. Yeah.
Exactly. I wish you all the success. Can't wait for the book
Yes, I'll keep you
and
posted.
keep
You could be my first interview after the book.
I love it. Keep writing, keep going, keep doing it, and keep leaning into your own ahas, right? And being more and more yourself and your own superhero. And this is an invitation for all of us to become our own superheroes.
100%.
Do you want to share anywhere where people can follow you? I don't know if you post. I know you post on LinkedIn. Would you like people to connect with you on LinkedIn or anywhere else?
Yeah, I do post on LinkedIn, and then I guess I'm on Instagram. I'm so bad at this stuff; it's terrible. I have an Instagram. I think it's the Noel Group. I think is the name of my Instagram. But they can also find me. I have a website. It's Noel Group, NOELGRP.com. Um, that I'm also expanding. It's got some of my Pivot and Rise stuff on there, but I'm working on a separate website that's going to be Pivot and Rise Up. So as soon as I get that all together, they'll be able to follow the book and all of that. But yeah, or they can reach out definitely through my website, and I can give them my socials or whatever. It'd be great.
Michelle, thank you so much for sharing your journey and your story.
Well, I appreciate your help too. It was great.